A giant was stealthily standing outside the window, peeking at the beautiful woman inside. He even reached his hand inside the house, behaving strangely. The woman mistook him for an attacker and was terrified. However, things turned out unexpectedly. He wasn't after the beautiful woman. He had his eyes on the chicken leg on the table. But a mere chicken leg was just a snack for a giant. Suddenly, he felt a stomachache and furrowed his brows. He clenched his fists and tightened his buttocks. With a loud bang, a typhoon-like fart wave swept across the entire city. The people around were instantly blown away by the powerful air current. Then, a homeless man's eyes lit up, as if he had discovered something. He wanted to smoke to relieve his craving, but when he struck a match, at that moment, Fatty suddenly woke up from a nightmare, covered in cold sweat. He was relieved it was just a nightmare. He was a university professor with an IQ of 300, possessing amazing talent. Now, he worked as a chemistry teacher at a school. Most of the time, he was buried in research in the laboratory. That day, a large number of hamsters suddenly appeared at the school. The entire campus was thrown into chaos. Teachers and students fled in all directions, panicked. Fatty, seeing this scene, couldn't help but wonder, how did the hamsters from the lab get out on their own? At that time, a female student was enjoying her sandwich. Suddenly, a hamster jumped into the mouth of the teacher who was lecturing. Soon after, Fatty was called to the principal's office for a reprimand. However, the chair was too small. Fatty struggled with all his might to barely squeeze his bottom into the seat. Then, he saw a hamster perched on the principal's head. The hamster, without a care in the world, first added 2 unknown pellets to the principal's coffee. Fatty dared not speak. Afterwards, the principal took a sip of coffee and immediately realized something was wrong with the taste. Immediately after, the hamster did a dive and jumped directly into the principal's cup. At this time, Fatty returned to the classroom and began to teach the students, but the students were laughing at him behind his back. It turned out that, while writing on the blackboard, he used his stomach to erase the characters he had just written. After class, Fatty was still secretly eating. Just then, a new teacher walked into the classroom. Fatty instantly felt he had fallen in love. This female teacher perfectly matched Fatty's aesthetic, but because of his obese figure, Fatty also began to feel a little inferior. Who knew? Fatty's figure was hereditary. The whole family was so obese, they were all strange. At the dinner table, they even held a farting competition. This day, Fatty mustered his courage and invited the female teacher to dinner. The teacher agreed. Fatty looked at his bloated figure and felt very dissatisfied. So, he decided to start losing weight from today. Others were exercising, he was moving slowly. Others were on the trampoline, but he was standing still. He even went to see a traditional Chinese doctor for acupuncture. But even with needles all over his body, there was no effect. Although Fatty's weight loss plan failed, he still went to a bar with his goddess. As soon as they arrived at the bar, they were eating, chatting, and the atmosphere was quite good. But it was suddenly ruined by a stand-up comedian. The comedian said Fatty's butt was like the full moon. The whole audience burst into laughter. The female teacher also felt very embarrassed. After the date, Fatty returned home very sad. He ran into his lab and started working on his experiment results. He was specifically researching weight loss drugs. These drugs were originally intended for animals, but now he wanted to be the lab rat. After the experiment, a bottle of blue liquid was ready. The fat guy drank it all in one gulp. Immediately, he convulsed in excruciating pain. Then he collapsed on the floor. At that moment, the fat guy's body showed abnormalities. His whole body deflated like a leaking balloon. Soon after, a thin, dark hand emerged. He went to the mirror and looked, and was startled by his reflection. He pulled up his shirt and pants and discovered he had truly lost weight. He was overjoyed and hurried to the mall. Entering a clothing store, he picked out a few tight-fitting clothes. Looking at his transformed self in the mirror, he was truly happy. Then, he pretended to be the fat guy's friend, Dahai, and he asked the female teacher out to dinner at a bar that night. At that moment, he put his hand on the woman's shoulder. Suddenly, his hand grew larger, and Dahai, startled, quickly pushed the woman away. He drank the weight loss drug again. That night, Dahai and the woman came to the bar, but the Dahai now was not the honest fat guy he used to be. His personality was completely different, a bit flamboyant. It was clear the woman didn't like him now. Then, Dahai saw the stand-up comedian from before, but this time, he was mocked by Dahai, making him unable to continue his performance. At this time, Dahai went on stage and shoved the man into the piano, getting revenge for the public humiliation he suffered last time. After Dahai returned to his seat, his lips suddenly thickened. The drug's effects were wearing off. Then, his stomach slowly grew larger. Dahai was scared and quickly ran away. As he was about to drive away, the fat guy's assistant ran up. His chin had returned to normal, and his feet grew larger. He slammed the accelerator, resulting in traffic paralysis, and he was trapped in the car, unable to get out. He had to call the firefighters to help pry open the car. Soon after, the fat guy drank the liquid again, but when he transformed into Dahai, the fat guy couldn't control himself. Dahai flirted wildly with girls at the dance, ignoring the female teacher and driving her away. That day, the fat guy was watching TV at home. He suddenly saw a video Dahai left for him. At that moment, the fat guy understood that every time he drank the liquid, it was a separate personality, not the fat guy himself. At this point, the fat guy realized the seriousness of the problem. He poured out all the remaining weight loss drugs, but then, the fat guy, thirsty, drank the nearby beverage, convulsed, and immediately transformed back into Dahai. It turned out to be a trap set by Dahai. He already knew the fat guy would make him disappear. At that moment, the assistant discovered him, trying to stop him, but he was knocked down with a punch. That night, Dahai came to the dance and started telling everyone the truth. At first, no one really believed him. Suddenly, his body began to change. Everyone was surprised. He took out a bottle of liquid and said that if this was drunk, the fat guy would disappear forever. Luckily, the assistant suddenly appeared and stopped him. Just as Dahai was about to punch, the fat guy took control and choked himself. Finally, the fat guy regained his identity. He began to confess to everyone, saying he was researching weight loss drugs, originally intending to help others, but because of selfishness, this farce happened. In the end, Teacher Yu didn't blame him, and even invited him to dance together, and the film ends here. Friends who like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.